watching through the years how everything's happened, working on these sets now with an Indigenously led process, it's like a freaking grounding rod has gone into the ground, and it just feels so different than back in the day working on film sets where, we were the minority all the time, and now working on these sets like, Little Bird and all these films that are doing this Indigenous led process is so completely and profoundly different in experience of how we see ourselves and how we tell our stories when we have that support and that love that comes from what's happening now in the industry.
I don't give a flying damn about you. I won't let you tell me what I can do. You can try to drown me, but my spirit is free, yeah, free, yeah. Generations, all my nations, all circle around me. So let's sing about it. Generations, all my nations, all circle around me. So let's sing about it.
Welcome to ReMATRIATE the Lens. Welcome, everyone. So I'd love to start with Michelle. Is there any exciting or favorite thing that happened in your work life this past year that you can look on?
I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I finally got 2 number ones on the first time in my whole career.
First time?
In my whole career, I've done, so did a film in Regina at that new LED surround screen that they have in Regina, which is super wicked. But yeah, my first time doing number one, and then the one I'm shooting right now is number one. And that's a long time to wait.
It's about damn time. My God.
Yeah, so it's been a long, watching the industry through all these years and watching a lot of the younger generation come up. You guys are so used to doing that, and for the ones that have done it for a long time, it's taken a long time to get there.
I heard Tantu, it was within the past 5 years that it was her first.
Yep.
Number one. I guess the number one is the lead, the protagonist of the film. And I just can't believe that.
No.
And such icons. I don't know. I see you and Tantu and people who've come before us, and I just have so much admiration. So the fact that it's the first time is honestly bullshit. I have no idea we could swear, but it is. Can we swear?
What about you, Janelle?
So I'm not much of an actor myself, but I am a TV personality, and I'm actually shooting something next week that I'm very proud of, and it's with CBC Because News. They're on TikTok and Instagram and everything like that. And as somebody who's trying to be a social media influencer as much as I am a stand-up comedian, I find being able to improv those jokes in real time, like on Because News, is great for what I do for a living. So I'm very excited to do that. And I've been watching them for a couple of years, and I was like, finally, I got that email. I was like, yes, time to be funny,
From the past year, there's a lot that I'm very grateful for. I think this past year, being a producer on the film Backspot with the director D.W. Watterson, and also getting to showcase my identity as a queer person, but also an Indigenous person and a former gymnast, and getting the theatrical release for that was a huge milestone. So something I'm super, super grateful for. But yeah, in the year, that was the biggest accomplishment, I would say.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. Isabel?
This year was a big year for me personally. I starred in my first feature back in my senior year of high school, and I'm 19 now, and it finally got a release, and it's on Apple TV Plus. It's called Fancy Dance. And it's been so great. I've been getting to do so much press alongside Erica Tremblay, the director and writer, and my very, very good friend and brilliant co-star Lily Gladstone. And, I adore both of them so much. So it's really been such an honor, and I've been so grateful just to get to spend time with them in such a big moment in my career.
What was the landscape like when you're getting on screen for the first time? What did those sets look like when you stepped onto them? And are they much different than they are now?
My first role that I booked, I was 16. So it wasn't that long ago. It feels like forever ago because I feel like so much has changed in my career and in my life and even in how the industry looks right now. It was for an APTN show, but shortly after I went to an Amazon Prime show called Three Pines where I met Crystal and Georgina Lightning and all around. And so that was my first like real introduction to a big set, and to have them alongside me was really, really great thing in terms of support and community. And it's something I look back on with a lot of appreciation.
I remember mine.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 years into my stand-up comedy career that Just for Laughs had a showcase and I was on it. And they brought me to Vancouver for New Wave of Stand-Up, season 2. And I've never been on TV before, but I knew that I had to make a statement. So I got there and I just followed all the rules. You know, it was during COVID, just wear your mask, all that stuff. Going on set, seeing all those lights, I was like, yes, this is where I want to be. I deserve to be in this room.
Period.
And thank you. And I got a lot of pushback from my comedy peers because I was only 2 years in the game. They said, you're not ready. You don't deserve this. You should have said no. And I had that imposter syndrome. Yeah, when I was there, but I kept trying to trump it with my ego. I'm like, no, I deserve to be here. So I told myself, there's going to be a shell for your special. If you stand out, they might not find you funny, but they will recognize you. So I wore this huge red carpet suit. It looks like I'm wearing a carpet. Yeah. And I had my hair slicked back and bright red makeup. And apparently, because I was wearing the suit, I just went out. I was like, yeah, and doing my jokes. And everyone was laughing. And I was in the moment. And it went off without a hitch. And ever since that, I was like, I want to do that again. Yeah. Let's do this again. So if there's an aspiring comedian out there, like, if you ever see them, just let them take that risk, you know? Yeah. Because if I just listened to my peers and said, let's just step away, I would have never had that like uplifting moment.
Yeah. Well, it's while you like mention imposter syndrome, and that was something that I felt like I faced for a really long time, and in many spaces I was explicitly made to feel like a diversity hire on certain sets, and it was giving me stage fright and all of it. But I realized when I was like listening to what that voice was, I was like, this isn't my voice. This imposter syndrome isn't actually my voice telling me this. It's all of the voices of like this system that wasn't set up for us, and the system that was built for cis white straight dudes, and so of course we'll feel not welcome in these spaces or that it's not made for us. But I felt in that moment that I was like, oh, this is a call for myself to make it a better space than when I first came into it, and also to forge a space where it can feel like it's also meant for us. And so I can fully relate to those feelings of imposter syndrome because it's real.
What was your first project?
My first project on stage, I was a munchkin in The Wizard of Oz on the production of Turtle Island Theater Company's Wizard of Oz on my res. And but my first role in a film project was way back in the day. It was an indie film. I was like 13 years old, and I played a love interest in it, which to like, I don't know, a pubescent kid. But that was funny because I thought like at that point I had made it because I had never imagined a role outside of a love interest. I didn't realize that you could aspire for more, or that there were more interesting roles with agency and all of that. So I think I've surpassed the dreams that I've had from that time of like the first role I've ever had. I've surpassed that time with being able to play roles that I never even imagined that could exist out there. But that was my first one.
Oh my God.
What about you? I feel like you were like
my first role was probably before all of you were born. This is crazy. My first role was in 1984.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was 16, and I was going to high school, and I was going to an all-native school in Calgary that was called the Plains Indian Cultural Survival School, the first one in Canada. It's because I kind of got kicked out of the public school system because of fighting, because I was always getting picked on and a lot of racism. So I went to this school in Calgary, and the only thing they didn't offer was a drama class, and I was so bummed about that because I love drama. So I was trying to always set up all these plays in school. The school got a call from a film production in Edmonton. They were looking for a 16-year-old girl, and they were like, there's one girl in this whole school, and she loves acting, and you got to see her. And so they came down to my school from Edmonton, and they auditioned me in the math room. And it was a film called Isaac Little Feathers.
Wow.
And yeah, it was my very first film. And that's when I flew to Edmonton on a plane and smoked cigarettes on the plane. It was so long ago.
You're smudging your lungs.
Yeah. So yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, but what was it like stepping onto that set then, and how different is it now?
I remember I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. I never took a class in my life. I kind of learned as I went along from some amazing people. But I knew I had to repeat myself over and over doing the exact same thing in each scene. And I remember the director, his name was Les Rose. And when he gave me the role, he said to me, I'm going to give you this role, but you have to promise me you'll never get into this business. It's horrifying. And I was like, oh, no, I'll never be an actor. No, I'm going to be a social worker. I'm going to go to university. And I got into that character, and I just loved it so much. But it was, at that point, I never thought that acting could have an effect on people. I wanted to do something that was going to change this whole world for children. And then I realized the power of acting, and then I never stopped. But I always think about how I promised him I'd never get into it, and now it's the only thing I know how to do. Yeah. So back then, though, it was obviously it was a totally different situation. We've grown so much through the years, and yeah, but it's changed so much since then. And the boy who played the lead, Isaac, was not even Native. He was South American, Latino. Not to say he didn't have Indigenous blood, but he was playing a young Cree boy, and yeah, just crazy. Yeah.
But then I still feel like, for what you said about feeling like a diversity hire.
For sure. I mean, the industry, even from when I've started, because I am a young person, but I have my first job was 18 years ago in this business. And I think at that time, yeah, there were different people playing different ethnicities. And I remember seeing projects, and not to say it's not still happening now sometimes. We're not going to get into that. But I think at that time, it wasn't great. I don't know if it was as bad as it had been historically through cinema. I think we've been historically excluded from these spaces and from being able to play ourselves and tell our own stories. And at the time that I was kind of coming up into this business, it was still rough. I remember when I moved to New York, I was auditioning for really stereotypical Pocahontas type roles, and I'm light skinned, I'm Mohawk on both sides of my family, but we are one of the first contact Native folks, so we're not gonna look the same as somebody from back in the day. But those were the only roles that were really out there. And I remember having to have a conversation with my agent where I was like, if I'm gonna have a sex scene, I don't want it to be in buckskin. I don't want to be in a bed of furs. I don't want it to be stereotypical. I just want it to be necessary and to be essential to the story and coming from the character, and not just this sexualized version of what a Native woman is supposed to look like. And I've been in a position of privilege where I'm able to turn down roles. I don't ever fault people for taking roles that are out there and wanting to work as actors. I'm like, by all means, do it. I think my issue has been more with who's creating these stories, what is the intent behind it. And I think where it's really changing now, and where I'm really noticing a difference, is that there are Indigenous filmmakers behind the lens. And I think that's where you can really feel that tangible shift and change, is that when we are telling our own stories from our own communities, it all feels different, and that it's coming from the inside out versus this weird voyeuristic, fetishizing, romanticizing, but also still being effing racist to view. And yeah, there's still a long way to go. I recently went out for a role, and it could have been a really interesting character choice to have an Indigenous person play this role, given the context. I don't want to like call them out on it. I don't want to give too much away, but there was roots to indigeneity in the storytelling. And when I had my team reach out, and this was maybe 2 months ago, they got back to us saying, no, they explicitly wanted a Caucasian actress for this role. And I think we're feeling that swing back. Even though we had a lot of progress, now it feels like we're reverting backwards a little bit, but we've always been here as storytellers, and we're always going to be here. And I think we just need to keep powering through and watching stories and consuming stories from our own communities.
Anyone else experienced any sort of feelings of your diversity hire or witnessed any sort of anti-Indigenous feelings on set?
Well, my first album actually was called Diversity Hire. And it was a collaborative album, and we had everything under the sun, just checking all those boxes, right? And I wanted to call it Boss Babes, but apparently that was a bunch of MLMs. Like, it was like, oh, okay, no, sorry. It was
Selling us leggings.
yeah, right. But that's one of the reasons people have a hate on for Indigenous comedians in the comedy scene, because they think we're just diversity hires, that we're only getting these spots because we're Indigenous, that they have to fill a quota and they have to make themselves look diverse, you know? And if it wasn't me, it was going to be someone else. And I'm like, well, I'm not just this diversity hire that you think I am. I'm also someone up there having a method to my madness. I have a message to my comedy. I'm ultra political, a little bit raunchy, but there's something else there. Like, it's not just because I'm Indigenous. I'm also real talented, I hope. Like, I can make people laugh. And it's always combating that. And I feel as a minority who's Black, Indigenous, gay, I'm not even starting where the cis white comedians are at 0. I'm starting at -2, -3, and I have to crawl my way up there just to make the audience feel comfortable enough with what I'm saying. I learned early on from that first day at the New Wave of Stand-Up that if I wear a suit, I can feel powerful. And if I wear a suit, it's almost like a manipulation tactic where the audience now feels comfortable with me and I'm smart enough to listen to. And I know that's wrong in a way. However, I'm tricking you into listening to me. But I'm like, maybe the next Indigenous comedian that, you know, is coming up who's also very political and raunchy doesn't have to use these tactics to finally get an audience to listen to them, you know? And I'm trying to break that one day at a time. You'll see me in a sweatshirt. You will. One day. Okay.
You do rock a suit, though.
Oh, I do. Shade. Hey.
Anyone else experience anything like that?
I mean, for sure. I think that when you're on a set with a crew and a cast that is Indigenous, there's that sense of community that you have. So that was what it was like on Fancy Dance. There was language on the screen, and then we were using the Cayuga language behind the scenes too for like all the calls, like rolling, action, everything was in Cayuga. And so there wasn't that isolation from it. It was in the roots of the work. But when you're on a bigger set that's kind of powered by that, you know, non-Indigenous voice, it becomes difficult as the Indigenous person to kind of head that cultural competency training that so many people miss. You know, it's like,
Well, we've all been like unpaid cultural consultants, I'm sure.
and so there are so many moments where you just have to teach people, and it's something that we, especially as Indigenous women, just accept because we want the work to be good and we want the work to have that sense of community that we feel so deeply. But when there's that separation, it becomes really difficult just on your own kind of energy, you know? You get tired from it. I was on set and, you know, this guy, he meant nothing by it at all. But he came up to me and I was like in buckskin and he was like, "So are you Indigenous?" And I was like, "Yes." I was like, "Yeah, I wouldn't be here right now if I weren't," because there is starting to be that, you know, agency in terms of like actually playing ourselves on screen. You know, that wasn't us for so long, but there's still these people who have this idea of us, you know, white people playing Native people. And I think that that moment for me was just like, it really took me by surprise. I was like, whoa, you know, I don't want to have to explain my identity to you, but it's something that I repeatedly am doing, and it's consistent.
Yeah. Does anyone want to talk about what motivates you to do this work that you're doing?
I have an answer, but I want to let somebody else go. I feel like the gust because I feel like I'm talking too much.
So like I said earlier, I really got into acting because I wanted to create change in the world. I grew up in a home with 2 alcoholic parents and not a lot of positive role models. And my grandparents drank and my aunts and uncles, and it just was a lot of violence and chaos in my life. And so I wanted to do something that was going to make the world a better place. And then I realized the power of our artists and how, you know, when I was in my teens, I can remember seeing like Tantu and Graham and Gary and Gordon and Chief Dan George. That was sort of our veterans, right? Like that's who really kicked down those first doors. But they just had these little bit roles. But when I'd see them on screen, I'd just be like, oh my God, right? And thinking back, it didn't feel feasible to be an actor because there really wasn't a lot of stuff. And you know, think about Running Brave, you know, watching that when I was a kid, and Robbie Benson, who was Jewish, playing the lead role of, you know, a Native character. And then yet you had Graham and Tantu and Margot Kane, I think, was in there. But they had these little bit roles, and I was just glued to the screen when I'd see our own people on TV. And Chief Dan George and Little Big Man and, you know, all those old films. And so in my brain, I never thought I could be an actor because there really wasn't the opportunity or the space. But then, you know, doing a film at 16, then doing another one a few years later, I just realized this is something that you have the ability to affect people on a heart level. And I often say when I'm speaking that the distance between myself on stage or in film and the viewer, that's where the medicine travels, right? Because we do have the ability as artists to really create change. And I think that we are in the front lines, right? In our communities, because we bring light to places that were previously dark. And we talk about the things that normally aren't spoken about within our own communities. And I think that's something that's very powerful as artists.
Michelle, thank you so much for saying that, because as a stand-up comedian, I try to express solidarity through humor. I try to not make fun of, but shed light on some of these atrocities that happened in our past. And I tackle those tough topics through humor in such a way that we start those conversations people are reluctant to have. Like I always thank Idle No More. I'm like, they gave ourselves permission to speak up about what's happened. And I like that. That's what you started out with. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that.
It's where the medicine travels.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
My main motivation are my younger cousins and my younger sibling, you know, my younger sister. We didn't grow up with a whole lot of Indigenous representation. You know, we would grasp at what we could find. And I tell this story so much because it is so real and true to my life. You know, I didn't have that representation, so I would, you know, there was like smoke signals, and then Spirit, you know, the movie with the horse. And so I would go to school and kids wouldn't know, you know, what being Indigenous meant, and I'd be like, have you seen the movie with the horse? That's what I am, and that's what I had as a kid. But, you know, getting to be a part of newer productions and then seeing newer productions, you know, like all of my family and my cousins love Res Dog so much, and getting to see ourselves on screen in a very real way is such a gratifying thing, and it's such a beautiful thing to witness, especially as a young person. And I think that a part of that is understanding that this industry is constantly changing, and there's so much space in this industry for all of us. You know, I feel like there's constantly this competition that's put onto us, but I feel like there's so much celebration to it as well that we bring to that space.
Indigenous women, we hang out, we talk to each other all the time. It's not about, jealousy or obviously there's been times where I'm like, I wanted that role. That was my role. Right? But in the end, it's like, I'm glad so-and-so got it, right? And just putting that into the center.
And it's so powerful because so many of us that we haven't even seen yet. I'm so excited to see new actors. Like, obviously, I want a book. It's my job, but I also am so excited to see new people and to meet new people because there's so many talented Indigenous actors.
So many women that aren't here today.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I just want to acknowledge Tina Keeper, right? Like she couldn't make it today, but she opened up so many doors. Like back, you speak about, res dogs, but there was also North of 60 back in the day, right? Like it's shows like that really gave us space to be able to contribute to the narrative. I have so much respect for this younger generation. And I think that it's important that we acknowledge how many people it took to get to where we're at today.
I mean, it is crazy. And like, I think I have also seen some of that shift where it did kind of feel like the scarcity mentality before, where it was like, I did feel that we really were put against each other and that it felt like, well, there's only so many roles, so we really have to duke it out. And now I do see so many people being like, oh, there's room for all of us and it's better to be expansive and invite everybody in. And the more we, like, I think what we're all trying to do here is like get through the door and then like leave it open and then get as many of our friends and cousins and community members in through with us. But it's like, that was interesting to hear that you even find now that there's that sense of competition that's placed, but I love to hear that you're like dispelling that. And what's the saying where it's like the tide rises all sails or something like that?
The tide rises all boats.
Yes, that's what it is. But I really believe that.
And not only that, like again, back in the day, guys were getting all the roles.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing, like men, like Adam and all those guys were just getting roles. And the women, it was very rare that we would, be offered. It was usually like one woman role to every 3 male roles. And so that's changing too now. We've got so many women that are directing and producing now and acting. Yeah.
And it only makes sense. Like women are the center of our cultures and the ones who hold it down. So I draw all of my inspiration from Ngwehwe women.
Absolutely.
Do you all have any sort of advice to anyone who might see this and think, oh, I can get into the industry? What should they keep top of mind?
When I first started, I was 14, which is 5, almost 6 years ago now. And I didn't book for 2 years. I auditioned constantly, probably did like 100 self-tapes. And, it's something that takes getting used to. I think what's so important about this industry is your love for it. It's such a, you guys know, it's such a tiring thing to do. Like it's a hard thing to do. But when you really, really care about it and you really, really love it, it makes it all worthwhile. And I think that rejection is something that's normal. And it's something that happens to everybody. But it was definitely a jarring thing for me at first. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this is ever going to happen. But when it did, it's just such a great community to be a part of. And
there's always that feeling, I'm never going to work again. Go through that so many times in my career where I'm like, I'm going to quit. I'm going to become a waitress. But you end up working again. And the other thing I would say for young people is don't put your identity into this business because it'll frickin' spit you out. You got to have friends outside of the business and an identity outside of the business. And it's a job, right? It's not your whole... I see a lot of young people that are just, they identify with their last job, right? And they're just like, I'm only as good as the last job I had. It's like, no. You're as good as your children and your family and the land you live on. And that's so much more important than this industry.
What I wish I would have heard growing up was like to get familiar with what really interests me. I think so often being an actor, you kind of take what you can get. And the first time that I was asked like, well, what are your dream roles? What are stories that you want to tell? I was probably 19 or 20. And I was like, what do you mean? I was still thinking of these love interest type roles being the max. And I'm like, I can think and imagine beyond that. And that's actually what prompted me to start writing and creating my own projects. Was I was like, oh, I have a perfectly capable voice of my own. Who's to say that I can't also share my stories and things that interest me? And I think through that, it gives artists agency instead of sitting around and waiting to be chosen for a role. You figure out what your tastes are, and then it helps you like really figure out which roles you do resonate with, and then it just like only strengthens from there. So I think getting to know yourself, because that's the sharpest tool you can have as an actor, as an artist, is to know your taste, know your voice. And I think that also comes with seeing things outside of the industry and life, being connected to ourselves and our communities.
I would say to the young kids who want to be, whether they want to be a comedian or a TV personality, play to your strengths,
Yep.
but also prepared for the workload. Because one of the biggest misconceptions in being, I guess, like being an actor or comedian, everything, and people believe what we get is just handed to us.
Yeah.
That we don't answer emails, that we don't do the audition, that we don't take that phone call, that we don't do our, our paperwork. It comes with the work behind it. And to the young comedians out there, just realize that you're going to bomb. You're going to say some bad stuff. Like, you're going to make some mistakes, but you have to kind of own up to it. I'm not one to apologize, but I am one to have changed behavior, because it's like apologies can be cheap sometimes. The Pope, anyway. But when you learn from your mistakes, you can grow. And being a comedian, you make tons of mistakes, because I didn't take school for this. I just jumped into the fire. I just said, like, I knew I wanted to be a comedian when I was like 14 years old, but it took until I was like 31 to finally jump into the fray after being a security guard for 7 years, gaining a backbone, being able to get yelled at in my face gave me that confidence. For the youth, play to your strengths, know what you're good at, and use them, because a lot of kids feel that, oh, I have ADHD, so I can't even focus on this. I'm like, well, you have ADHD. Well, you actually have some tools in your pocket you don't know yet.
Creativity.
Like, your creativity is like up here. Yeah, your attention's down here, but like you can find that middle end. Yeah, so I found that within myself, and it made me a stronger comedian.
Well, it feels like in our jobs that when we're doing the work, that like when work is done well, that it looks invisible, that it looks natural, like it looks like we're not doing anything at all. So people think that it's so easy, and really there's a lot of prep and hard labor behind it.
Kind of related to the invisible prep, in terms of language, I feel like we have to do so much work.
We don't do language anymore.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's something that's just so expected of us. I step on a set and it's like, oh, you have a bunch of lines in this language that is not yours, that you don't know anything about. And don't you speak? No. Like, I don't even speak my own language yet. Like, and so I'm expected to know these things. And I think it's a very important thing to show on screen as our languages, but I also think that it's something worth mentioning and appreciating the work that gets put into it, because a non-Indigenous actor goes and learns like French or Spanish or anything, and it's so celebrated and it's this insane accomplishment, but we've been doing this forever.
I did a show in Montreal, and I had 2 days notice. I had to do Mohawk, so I just it's hard. So I got them to put an earpiece in and have a speaker on set, and they were just feeding me, because there's no way, and I didn't want to bastardize, like, it's not my language. And and I've done many auditions where they say, speak in your language, and I just count to 10 and creep, but make it look like I'm doing something really important. So funny.